How's it going, everyone? We're going to talk today about the 3.1.1 update. It's going to be a quick video, so we're not going to go into details with everything. I'm just going to show you the key functions of it. Let's just jump straight in. We're going to add a mesh. We're going to scale it by 15. There we go. So let's add a material and let's talk about the new material functions like so. And we're just going to now jump into the new functions. So underground, we've got main, secondary, and shoreline. Let's add a secondary node and change it to the noise and strata mask. And you are going to need to open up your shader editor for this because there are some advanced features that I didn't want to stick in the user interface because it would have just made it a bit too cluttered. So we can see here we've got some pink thing going on, and that's the mask itself. So we can turn off our noise and strata, our strays on the noise and strata mask, and we're just going to scale that to like 2 and increase the mask expansion amount, and then just increase the intensity of all of that. And we're just going to pick a second material, and it's going to be the green grass. And we can see that we've now broken up the primary ground material. But I want to talk to you also about the anti-tile functions. So when you tile a material or a texture, you get a lot of this going on, this uniform pattern that goes across it. And even if the texture itself is seamless, you still get this, and it's just the nature of a tiled texture. But what we can do is we can apply our anti-tile and change that up to say 50, and we no longer have any tiled material. If we wanted to have more material, so you've got a bigger environment, you can tile this up to like, or scale this up to like 500, and you will not get any tiling at all. Even if you went all the way up to like 50,000, there's no tiling at all. I mean, the texture would be tiny, but there's no tiling at all. Whereas if we did the same for, you can see the tile is still there, whereas with the anti-tile on, it is gone. So let's leave that on 500. And let's talk about the shoreline option. So we're going to add the shoreline in, and it will add in an empty that you need to use. So we're just going to bring that up to here and scale it by like 2 to soften the fall off. Select our mesh again, and let's just choose our material for our shoreline. And now we have some sand for that. We also have some new function in the shader tab or the shader settings for wetness. So now you can add some wetness to your material, and it's applicable to every one of them. You can add wetness to all your materials, make your rocks wet, ground wet, all that kind of thing. So let's jump onto the rocks and add a secondary into that, and that'll automatically be a noise and strata. And as you can see, we've got some bands that run across, and this is strata. So in nature, when rock formations go on top of each other, it becomes layers of rocks, and those layers are called strata. We're just going to reduce that to like 0.5 and distort it a little bit and add a secondary rock in, and we're going to just go for a dark one so that we can see the difference between the two. And as you can see, we've got this now. So we've broken up our rock with an additional rock material. So I'm just going to jump onto the snow and show you the reworked snow. And this also imports in with a snow empty. And the snow empty determines where the ground will show and where the peaks will show. So if we turn our peaks off, we can see that the peaks were calculated all the way down the bottom. Whereas if we move our snow location up, we can see now that like the ground area is where this line is. To increase the fall off, we just scale the empty again, and you can see that as you scale the empty, it fills in the cracks. Even moving it down, we can see that it still fills in all those cracks and things. But we're going to talk about the displacement and how to flip this if you don't want anything on the ground and if you just want it on the top. Having it obviously snowy peaks covers the whole thing, but if you don't want that effect and you want just the top to be snowy and the bottom to have none on, I'm just going to show you that in a second. But first, let's talk about the displacement side of things. So we're going to add our displacement on, and we're going to come down to the snow displacement intensity and just put that up to 3 for now, and you'll see that our snow displaces on here, but we need to enable the adaptive subdivision for this, and just make sure that we've set the shading to smooth like that. And you can see that we've got a bit of displacement already, but what if you want to displace this ground more and you want like a kind of smaller crevices or like patchy flat bits? Well, to do that we just increase the lumpiness to like 3.5. What this does is it creates like lumps or drops in the snow. If we change that to like 4, you can see the amount of the lumps changes again. You can also change the location of these, so if you're not happy with where those lumps are forming, you can change the location of all that just by moving the snow displacement location value, and it will just randomize the seed on where it's all generated, like so. But we're probably looking at this thinking it doesn't look that great at the moment, and you would be right. So we want to turn on our snow subsurface scattering. We're just going to put that on 1.5, and I want to increase the like detail of the surface. So to do that, you just these options here. You can reduce the height of that detail or the prominence of that detail, or you can bang it all the way up. And if you wanted to, you can just overkey everything and change it to like 5, and you can see that this detail shows in the air. But if you want it to be more, I don't know, like close-up detail, you just change the scale, like so. So you'd have the scale quite small if you really wanted to, or you could have it quite large, or you could even sort of go all the way down to like 0.1. But I think we're just going to have it on 3 for now, and we're going to change the height back to 1. 1.5. Yeah, and leave that as it is, and we're just going to increase the intensity of the displacement to 5 so that you can see how this works. So I'm just going to flip the sun. So I'm just going to render this out for you all so you can see how this looks sort of from a final point of view, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. And here we go, guys, we've got the snow rendered out. As you can see, the way the snow forms and generates is as close to as it would naturally anyway, based on the masks that are created for the snow. So the top half is smooth, I guess, where it'd be exposed to the wind, and then the bottom half, or the bit that comes in the troughs, is all lumpy and fluffy. So that's kind of how that works. Let's jump back onto the add-on itself. So I've had a lot of people question or ask me why it runs slow in Eevee, and that's because it is not developed for Eevee. The add-on itself was never developed for Eevee. Eevee was never in mind when creating this. I mean, it does work in Eevee, but it's not optimized for Eevee, and that's going to be somewhere down the roadmap, because there are just functions in Eevee that are not available, that are available in Cycles, unfortunately. So that's where we stand on the whole Eevee thing. But let's just add the water in, and let's scale it up by 50, apply the scale, and so let's render it out. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that there's no volume, and that's because you need to increase the thickness of the solidify modifier, and then we're just going to change the volume density to like 2.5 to hide the base of the mesh. So you can probably see that there's like a white fog around this, and that is because of the shore foam function. So let's jump into the shore foam, and let's add the noise, and let's reduce the distance to 0.25, and let's just increase the foam intensity to like 10. And we're just going to increase the noise amount to 5 or 10, so we can see that there. And we're just going to bring that add noise down a little bit, so we can get a nice fall off. So that's how the shore foam works, and it moves around based on where the mesh is in the water. So I mean, you can put anything in the water, and it will get some foam on it, as you can see. And if you rotate it, the foam moves around with the object. So that's the shore foam. Pro tip for the water, and I'd suggest this for anyone anyway, because it just adds a little bit of extra detail. If you come into the material panel and go down to settings and change it from displacement only to displacement and bump, what this does is it takes the displacement values and also puts them into the bump of the material. So if you want a bit of speed up in the viewport, you can turn off the subdivision modifier and you can still see where everything is. We just increase the displacement amount to 1, so you can see it all, and this will show you where everything kind of is displacing. So let's go into the waves, because at the minute the waves look a little bit bleh. But what I want to do is come to the material or shader editor, and there's an animation debug. It's also the mask for the material, and we're just going to put that there, snap it into the surface output, because we're going to add the wave breaking on. And you'll see that the material goes darker, but we need to add a value to this. And what that does is it masks off parts of the surface to not have any waves and only produce waves in certain areas. So you're going to want to keyframe this value, because there's a bug in Blender that for some reason is snapping this back to 0. But if you just keyframe it at 1 until we can find a fix for it, it'll fix the issue. So we can see here that we've got this, and you can move the location of the breaking to wherever you want. And it's best to do this in the animation debug, just so you can see it happen quicker. We're going to have that there, and I want to add I want to break the top of these up a little bit. So we're just going to add wind, and adding wind breaks the surface of this mask up, so that the waves become a little bit more broken, as you can see, and obviously turning the wind off makes everything a bit smoother. So we'll put that back on to maybe 0.5 or something, and I want to increase the amount of waves, well, make the waves smaller. So to do this, we just go to wave amount and change that to like 20, and we can see now we've got smaller, more waves, but because the smaller, the distortion value gets a little bit crazy. So we're just going to change the wobbliness down to like 10, and make them a little bit more uniform across the surface of the ocean. And to give it a bit more realism, let's add some surface foam. And when we do this, probably best to go into like top-down view just to see where the foam is generating. And we're going to change this reduce foam coverage. We're just going to reduce that value like that, so we can see where the foam is. And we're going to randomize the foam generation seed so that we can move the foam around on here. And we're going to change the seed size to like 3, and we're just going to change the foam size, which breaks up these bits. So the foam size is based on this factor. I mean, you can have it to like 0.1 and have very little detail there, but we're going to change that to like 10, add a bit more detail in, and we're going to change the normal strength to like 0.1 or 0.5, like that, and then we're going to change the foam amount to 5, like that. And we're going to go back into our rendered view, camera view, sorry, and have that like that. And now we've got foam generating on the crests of the waves, and which would happen. But if you didn't want waves, you can just turn the waves off, and we'll have foam just randomly generate across the surface based on like the ripple values. And we would just go to ocean foam and increase that value like that, and increase the foam out a little bit just to sharpen it off. So now we've got just foam in general, and I mean you can change the foam amount again to like 20 or something if you really want it visible, but that's entirely up to you. And then we just snap the subsurface back on and increase the displacement. You can increase the displacement. This works. This changes the overall displacement of everything, so it will make everything more displaced. So now we've got like a choppy ocean. And there's a couple of things that I want to talk about with this, is because you can make this very detailed by changing like the intensity of the micro details and changing the large detail intensity too, and changing the ripple amount. So if we change that to like 50, we'll have more large ripples. Yeah, and now we've got some very large scale water, and if you wanted to, you can just slightly increase the waves amount, and this will just add some waves back in on top of everything. And you can change the wave height by just changing the wave height here. So we don't want the waves to be that high. You can still see the waves and things there. But I want to talk about animating all of this. So we want to go back into the debug. We're just going to snap this off for a second. So we're just going to change all these values to 0 and keyframe them. And we're going to change the wave location to 0 and keyframe that. We're going to snap over to the frame 250 and change the wave location to 100. And we're going to change these ones, the X, Y, and Z values, to like 150 and 20. And keyframe them. Our waves move across. One quick tip I would advise is, for your animation, make sure that the graph is set to linear. So just select the shader node and then come into your graph editor and change it from Bezier to linear. And this means that everything moves in a natural sort of fashion, rather than starting off slow, increasing to a quicker speed, and then falling off slowly again. That doesn't work for waves, really. There's no real support for Eevee when it comes down to this, and the reason for that, like I said, is just because Eevee doesn't provide the options that Cycles does. So just bear that in mind when you are trying to use it. It is not designed for sort of real-time stuff. And that's the update for 3.1.1. That's all the features that have been brought in. There were loads of bug fixes. We addressed some issues that were happening in Eevee with people on Macs, and this is sort of here, the Eevee fix button. And if you're having any pink textures, you just click this and it will fix whatever those pink values are. One thing I will say is, because it's been addressed, when people are using the particle system, it is bogging down people's viewports. To fix this, it's very, very simple. Before you insert anything, click on the defaults, go down to emission, check that box, and just change that to something like 10. And then when you add in your trees, for example, it'll only add 10 of them in. You'll also notice that with trees, they're on the side. We need to snap active to defaults, then go to render, and then make sure object is selected, and just change this one here to object rotation, and then just apply to active, and it'll put everything back the right way up. And this is only for the trees. Everything else pulls in fine anyway. So you don't need to do this for everything. It is just the trees. Alternatively, if you don't want to use the sub panel, you can use it in here. But the problem with using it in here is, if you're having issues with your viewport when you're importing these particles, you can only affect the way these are imported once it's actually amended. So if you've got 1,000 showing and that's the thing that's bogging down your viewport, then you'll need to use the defaults button first, and change the emission number to like 10 or something. And then once you're in here, you can scroll down to viewport display, enable that, and change the amount to like 10%. Apply that to your active, and then you can bang the number all the way up and apply that to active, and then you've got like a lot less showing, so your viewport won't be as bogged down. So for example, if you really wanted to like render 1,000,000 trees or something, what's that, 1,000, 1, 2, 3, then you could do that. I mean, my viewport's a little bit slow, but you could do that if you wanted to, just by changing the display amount to 1, like 100,000. You know, you see you've got some really massive terrains, and you really want like 100,000 trees or something for some reason, then you know that is there. And like I say, the default option will fix anyone who's having any viewport problems. One thing to remember is when you do import your particles, you just need to make sure that your subdivision is back on the bottom, so that when you're using the tessellated geometry, it physically shows. And obviously when you scale things up, you just need to make sure that your displacement strength is also set higher, because when you scale things up, the displacement value is like exponential or something. I don't really know the word for it, but you need to increase the displacement amount to ensure that everything displaces properly. So that's that one, guys, and I'll leave you with that. For anyone who wants to know any more information, just let me know in the comments. Give me a shout on Discord or through the Blender Market email system, and I'll leave you with this render of the 100,000 trees. Have fun. Thanks for supporting me. Make sure you subscribe for updates, and that's it. Take care, guys.